Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. How's everybody doing?
Hey, guys.
Incredible. Hello, hello.
Good. How are you guys?
I think we're about to
Doing
hear
good.
how Ryan's doing, actually.
Yeah, indeed. Well, first of all, Ryan, did you recover from? You've had a pretty intense week, going to
I feel
Zohran's
good.
thing and then making it back for your son's birthday and all
He's
that.
crazy. Ryan's crazy. I'm tired.
Put in my veins. I'm feeling good. Yeah, it's like it's an invigorating week, is what it is.
There you go.
Did you microdose through it?
I didn't even have to microdose through it. Also, I always remind myself that it's not really work. It's just I really like get to do stuff I enjoy doing and get to be at historic events, like people who are actually doing work and waking up like before the sun is up, out the door before the sun is up, or like working on
well, we call that breaking points.
That's true. But still, that's only a couple hours. They're doing that and it's like 8, 10, 12 hours and then another job. So like those are people who work. I don't even think of it as work.
People who know Kyle know that it's impossible to like get him out of the house to do basically anything. But even he, watching the Zohran victory party videos, was like, damn, we should have gone.
Yeah.
I was like, you
I
say
saw
that now. There's no way I could have convinced you to go in advance.
I saw the funniest post in response to Kyle's victory post where he was playing music and smoking a cigar. Someone quote tweeted it and was like, damn, when did Kyle become Dominican?
I know. He was proud of that. He was like, did you see this one?
So good.
Anyway, should we jump in? Ryan, you've got an update for all of us. Dropsite is being sued and in the UK where the libel laws are insane. So you want to give us the tea here of what's going on?
Yeah, and this is also invigorating in a way because this comes with the territory of doing investigative journalism. And actually, we're not technically being sued. The writer, Owen Jones, who wrote the piece for us, is being sued. And that's because of the complications of UK libel law. They can go directly after him. But we are defending the case. The reason we're talking about it now is that some of the documents became public recently, and the Telegraph reported about the case. Otherwise, we were just fighting this behind the scenes. But we've already racked up roughly like $40,000 in legal bills and are barely in the beginning stages of it. It's utterly insane how expensive this stuff is. But we are 100% standing behind the story, and we're planning to defend it in court. So we set up a legal fund that people can support overnight. We set it up yesterday. Overnight, people have given so far more than $50,000.
Wow.
So that's more than our bills so far. Now the bills are going to continue to rack up. If we win a full victory, there is a real expectation that we could actually recoup all those costs, and that the BBC editor who's suing us would have to pay for our legal costs. And I do expect that that's likely to happen. But in the meantime, we have to, the lawyers keep sending invoices, and we have.
That's amazing.
We have to keep paying them. So thank you to everybody who gave overnight. We can put the link, I guess, in the description, or you can find it on my pinned tweet. And the more we have, then the more it sends a signal to plaintiffs in general. Like if you come after us, like we will defend ourselves, and we have a community of readers who will help us defend ourselves. We have libel insurance, but there's a significant deductible that you have to hit. As anybody who's in journalism or understands the idea of insurance, like that's how that works. So we're nowhere near the deductible yet, and every dollar you have to spend on that, it takes away from the journalism. So any help is deeply appreciated, and we do expect that we're gonna win this.
This is an important piece, too. I remember when this came out, in-depth investigation into systemic bias at the BBC in their Israel coverage. And so, I understand why they were upset by it. But that you were saying they haven't really alleged that you got anything wrong. And I know you guys 100% stand by the reporting.
Right. They say that our kind of conclusions are wrong, but they don't allege any errors in fact. Like UK law is very strange. It's like,
yes.
Like what do you mean?
Has it always been like that, Ryan? Because essentially they're alleging that you hurt his feelings, right?
It's one of the reasons that I am such a strident defender of the First Amendment. Like the First Amendment is actually meaningful. It actually matters. And the UK doesn't have one, and they deeply suffer for it. Krystal and I were just talking about, we don't quite understand how they have this coexisting of this rabid tabloid culture where they just recklessly publish all sorts of nonsense. Yet also these bizarre libel laws. It's not clear how those two things coexist together. If anybody understands that, maybe elucidate that in the comments for us, because it's really weird. It's like, because this was a fact check piece. This is a piece we took very seriously. There's, it's accurate. We stand behind it. Yet we're still, getting drained of all this money to defend it in court. Where in the U.S., a suit like this would be like, no, you don't have any case here. Go.
Yeah. My theory about that is always that it's the way that people get around the laws is by burying things in crazy sourcing. So you get someone in the royal family, like associated with the royal family, tell you something crazy and then attribute it to a source.
Right.
And that's how that's I don't know. That's my best theory. But I was going to say, Ryan, also people should realize if you don't want to set a precedent in the wrong direction either, because with small indie media booming right now, the process can be the punishment. So if you start filing a bunch of lawsuits and people don't have money to defend themselves, because lawsuits are extremely expensive, and CNN and NBC, they have all of the resources in the world, best lawyers that are on their staff. It's different than if you're just going after the indie publications who can be bankrupted just by the process.
Right. That's a great point. If powerful people or powerful interests think that they can shut down independent media by just lobbing a bunch of lawsuits at them, they're gonna keep doing that. So if you give on that, then they're just gonna keep going. But if you defend yourself and it actually ends up costing them, then they're going to think twice the next time they think about going after this outlet or any other independent outlet. Be like, oh, wait, they have a huge audience that is going to support them if we come after them. So we have to then factor that in to our calculation of whether or not we want to launch this suit. So,
all right. Well,
anyway,
we're going to keep that link in there. Let's keep funding DropSite because, like Ryan said, DropSite is the tip of the spear against the BBC censorship regime.
And against many other things, by the way. I think people know at this point how truly, and I mean, if we didn't have DropSite doing this reporting during the course of this genocide, there's just so many stories that would never have been brought to light. And I don't even think I have to say that. I think people just know that that's obviously the case at this point. So heartening to see people backing you up with their dollars and showing how much they support the work that you guys do.
Yeah, appreciate you all.
Yep. I will be making a sizable $20 donation at the end of the show. Okay, so we have a big show. We're going to have a lot to get to. We're going to try to fly through a lot of topics. We've got election stuff. We have more shutdown stuff happening with the airlines closing flights. And we have Michael Blake. He's a former DNC vice chair, I believe. And he just announced
from the Bronx. Yep.
And he just announced, we met him at the Zohran event, but he just announced a primary run against Ritchie Torres. So we'll be speaking to him a little bit later in the show. But first, we want to go to Emily. Emily, it was a big election a few days ago. What day is it? I guess it was this week still. It was revolutionary. An underdog came from behind, challenged the entire system. I, of course, am talking about Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. Emily, what do you make of it? Because you left the live stream early. Any big reactions from you before we get to some of the cope?
The margins were just, your guys' analysis, I think, is what I shared. The margins were higher than what Republicans expected in Virginia and New Jersey. And just before we went to air, I was reading Politico Playbook this morning, and Mikey Sherrill has a quote in it where she says, if I'm talking to you about abortion and you can't pay your rent, then we're not having a conversation. I'm paraphrasing her, but that's the gist of what she said to Politico Playbook. And I feel as though even these sort of Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill types have kind of unlocked the key to finally, after 10 years, actually challenging MAGA on some of those actual questions that people go to sleep with and wake up in the middle of the night with. And that's I think a revelation. It shouldn't have been that hard, I guess, but I think that's where we're at. I think that's how Zohran beat Andrew Cuomo. And in the meantime, what we've seen is Republican reaction being, we have a little bit of a copulation. That's what we're calling it, Griffin, a copulation. This is Representative Lisa McClain on CNN explaining what happened on Tuesday to Jake Tapper.
The politics of this for a second, because, President Trump told Republicans earlier this morning, according to a source talking to CNN, that Republicans are getting killed politically on the shutdown. And if you look at what happened last night, it is hard to say that there is anything in the election results. And I'm looking at not just like, I get it, New Jersey's a Democratic state, but looking at Republican counties, looking at Republican sheriffs that lost their jobs. It's hard to see anything last night that was an endorsement of what the Republican Party is doing right now.
Yeah, well, let me give you the other side of that story. Is voter turnout from Republicans was not high, not high at all. But I think part of that reason is because Republicans, for the most part, are happy with what's happening. The border's closed. Crime is down. Inflation under Biden used to be 9%. It's now down to 3%. Interest rates are down. Mortgages down. Let me just finish. Let me just give you the other side. I shop at the same grocery store as everybody else does.
So you see prices are up.
Is there more work that needs to be done? Absolutely there is. That's why in the Working Families Tax Cut, we did just that.
So, Emily, the take is that people are too happy, that the key to an election defeat is happiness.
Too happy to vote for Winsome Earl-Sears, obviously. Because she's saying Republican turnout is low, but this was part of what J.D. Vance wrote the next morning as well, that low propensity, the Republican base is now the low propensity base and more needs to be done. I actually think that's true. I mean, anytime you have midterm cycles or off-year cycles, then yes, you need to be focused on mobilizing your own voters, especially if they tend to be low propensity voters. But in a place like New Jersey, where Donald Trump was actually close to Kamala Harris, so like the margin was closer than people realized. What we're looking at is the Republican Party losing swing voters. And that's, the margin for Mikey Schill, I think, ended up being about 13 points, about 15 for Spamberger, double-digit wins in states where you couldn't.
Jay Jones outperformed Kamala Harris.
Yeah, there you go. And in states where you couldn't.
And the lady who leaked the text, the Republican lady who leaked the text, lost her seat. Like, someone was like, that's the most dark woke moment I've ever heard in my entire life, which is so true. But
what was the relationship between those two that they were sending these kind of texts? That's what I want to know.
I wondered that all along.
Right?
Where are the investigative reporters? Where
I never understood
where are the tabloids?
That.
Speaking of the UK tabloids, where's the Richmond tabloid that's gonna unearth
Richmond tabloid.
What's going on? What's going on with these two?
I'll ask that guy Ben Tribbett, not Larry Sabato, if he can dig into that one.
I bet they all know. I bet they all have some rumors going around, but they.
Well, that's probably why she was reluctant to release, because normally, first of all, why are you texting Republican that stuff? Why are you texting anyone that stuff? But especially Republican.
Why would you put that down in writing? That's like your dark thought. You put it in the back of your head.
They both married. What's the situation here?
I don't know. And the other thing that I saw is this person he was talking about that he was had the 2 bullets for. This is like a totally unremarkable state legislator. Like, I have no idea what this person did to whatever. When I first saw the story, I was like, oh, that's probably the text. They're probably blowing it out of proportion. And then I read the text and I was like, holy hell. Yeah. And it is like, on the one hand, Emily, I think you're right that Zohran really led the way with the affordability message, and Democrats saw how powerful that is. Now, they're not going to embrace all of the Zohran policies, but they were like, oh, this guy's onto something. He's onto something so much that he was able to go from 0% in the polls to really defeating by a landslide this political Zion with all the dollars behind him. Not to mention other, Brad Lander and Scott Stringer and Brian, you were pointing this out, other significant progressive figures in the city. This stuff is potent. I do think that they leaned into that messaging. I also think that Democrats were ready to vote for anyone with a D by their names. It did not matter where what your messaging was, where you were ideologically, whether you threatened to murder your political opponent and their children, didn't matter. They were going to vote for you. And, it was certainly, look, the turnout thing is trite and cliche to say, but there were also, I think it was the New York Times did an analysis. There were also some Trump voters who switched sides. Abigail Spanberger, I believe, won 9% of the people who self-identified, told pollsters that they were Trump voters. And that may sound like a small number. But when you're talking about, midterm election, when you're talking about the next election, that level of a switch from one party to the other is actually massive. And then obviously you saw huge swings in demographics that Republicans have been really proud of picking up gains in, Latinos in particular, young men in particular. demographic groups, by the way, that they have based their gerrymandered maps on holding on to some portion of, really putting into jeopardy their plans to redraw things in a way that are going to be more beneficial to them. And so, I mean, I'm genuinely curious from you, Emily, like, I know what JD Vance is saying publicly, like, oh, this is no big deal. These were blue states. I don't believe for a second that he thinks that. You can't lose by 20 points in 2 statewide races in Georgia and think that this was like one-off, nothing to see here, or lose your supermajority in Mississippi and be like, oh, this was just some blue state stuff, nothing, don't worry about it. So privately, what are people saying? Privately, what are people thinking about what happened here and like how or if they're going to adjust in any sort of way?
Well, I think so. Vivek Ramaswamy had probably the most, I think, popular response, as odd as that may be to say, and it was echoed by Vance in his own post, where eventually Ramaswamy and Vance just converged on the same message, which is that you have to focus on affordability and cost of living. Then Donald Trump came out and said the same thing. He's like, they have this new word, affordability, later in the day. And
he
so
said, forget about affordability.
Yeah. People, I mean, long lost word. It's like, what did he calls? There's like, what does he say? Like refrigerators at some time. At some point,
groceries is the other word he loves. Yeah,
great.
It's
like
very
people forget about that word. Yeah, but so I think people are, and it's insane again. But I think it's especially been. I know, Krystal, you also want to talk about the Heritage Foundation stuff, but I think it's especially been the contrast between the entire professional right in Washington, D.C., focusing relentlessly on leaks coming out of a think tank, while you get creamed in a midterm election cycle where I'm pulling up the data here, like independents swung big in a lot of these key races towards Democrats. And that was not the case in 2024. So when you see numbers like that and you look at what the right has been focused on the last couple of weeks, it puts it in pretty stark relief. And so, I mean, it's like... I feel like it's pretty obvious, but and these professional people should not need reminders that normal human beings have to pay their bills. But it's one of those lessons you would think the Republicans might have learned from 10 years of Donald Trump. Sorry, my phone just went off, but have not.
I would submit that the problem isn't so much the debate over like Nick Fuentes and Israel and whatever. It's the fact that there's a question of whether Nazis are allowed in the coalition and the way that extremist policies and ideologies are expressed from the top of the party, and the way that that is incredibly repellent to a lot of normal people. I mean, Stephen Miller's on the other side of the quote unquote Jewish question, but this is the guy who's leading all the immigrations. They just did some like, we're only taking white refugees thing. You've got the mass that's in the street, the, now the Kavanaugh stops where you can just overtly racially profile. Every day there's news stories coming out about how Greg Bovino lied in court, how they're tear gassing 2-year-olds, how they're bragging about how their marksmanship after they shoot an American citizen 5 times in the back. And so what I said is, I think people actually will put up with a lot of authoritarianism, but only if they're getting some shit out of it. Not just for the sake of sadism. Like, we're not all psycho terrorists like Stephen Miller. So, if it was making the trains run on time and people's rents were coming down, whatever, then I think, yeah, people would be like, well, it's not great, but what are you going to do? The way that they do with, let's say, Bekele, right? Where they had a massive crime problem and I would never support his policies, but they genuinely brought the crime down. People are like, yeah, what are you going to do? Here you have an administration where their authoritarianism is making things more lawless, injecting more chaos, more criminality into their streets and their communities. And at the same time, they're cozied up to a bunch of oligarchs, giving away giant tax cuts to the rich. Your rent is going up. Your groceries are going up. Your energy bills are going up, which, by the way, is related to giving the store away to the oligarchs who are putting these data centers into your town. And what are you doing? You're throwing yourself great Gatsby parties and building yourself an elaborate, gilded, multi-$100 million ballroom, which seems to be the thing you actually care about versus anything else that's going on in the world. So, I think voters are getting the message like, oh, you were lying when you claimed you cared about me and my life. You were lying when you said that you cared about the affordability crisis. That was just political language meant to sucker me into voting for you. And so if you're a Democrat, like all the, the mass thugs in the street and all of that, hyper energizes you. If you're an independent, you're appalled at that, and you are very disappointed and unhappy with the state of the economy, which some 70+% of voters say is poor. And if you're a Republican, you're like pretty depressed because, there was some. Look, you said you were going to release the Epstein files. You didn't do that. You said you were going to be looking out for me. I'm not feeling that great. And I'm not ready to vote for Abigail Spanberger, but maybe I'm just not going to have time on that day to get out and vote. So to me, it's not a mystery of what went wrong here. But, I feel, and Sagar kind of raised this point, I feel a little bit like when Democrats would start to say like, oh, we got to re-message, we got to talk more about this, we got to talk more about that. It's like, no, you don't need to talk more about affordability. You actually need to deliver you have a reality problem. And unless you're going to do a total 180 on, pull the National Guard out of the cities, pull the mass thugs out of the streets, really do some unorthodox things for Republicans that are going to change people's material conditions like immediately, you are in for a massive reckoning come 2026. And I think that cake a lot of things can happen, but in a lot of ways, that cake is pretty much baked.
I'll toss it to Ryan and Griffin after that. I mean, I think the fact that they don't even talk about it, and they're like looking back and realizing that the president spent the last year roughly focused on foreign policy. Obviously, they had their one big beautiful bill, but they're looking back and saying the last 3 months, like, why was nobody talking about this? And I think with that Mikey Sherrill quote, you can interchange a lot of things from abortion. You could put in talking about Israel, talking about, whatever else Trump has talked about, and many different, the White House, like getting rid of the East Room, right? Like,
I mean, all the ads in Virginia, a big proportion of the Republican ads in Virginia were about transgender issues, and people are like, maybe I don't agree with her, but you know what? I'm struggling out here and I'm not voting for another Republican right now.
Yeah. And I posted about this afterwards. Is like, it's not like capital P, capital W, peak woke anymore. When Youngkin came in and was able to talk about a lot of these things, the future of politics doesn't look like 2021, and that should have been fairly obvious. If you want to talk about those things, if you want to, first of all, you have to be careful to actually talk about what matters to people. And if you insist on talking about them, because those things do matter to some people, to many people, then you should tie it back into the conversation about like elites. Bernie does this all the time about elite distractions. But you could go further. You see, these are the same people sowing discord in your school district that are also bankrupting you and making your life miserable in a myriad of different ways. But Republicans don't believe that. And centrist Democrats certainly don't believe that. So, but yeah, I think they do need to deliver, Krystal.
You're actually the one constantly bringing it up. You'd be like, my opponent's obsessed with this thing that I just cannot stop talking about 24/7 and have spent millions and millions of dollars on, and she's not saying anything about, order to make
Spanberger didn't talk about it. Right. And that's the difference between 2024 and 2025 is Spanberger's not talking about it.
Yeah. And real quick, because I know we got to move because we got Blake coming pretty soon. A couple of things that she said. She said grocery prices are down. That's not true. Grocery prices are up. She said energy prices are down. I think gas prices are down about 10 cents a gallon since Trump took over, but electricity prices are absolutely through the roof. And she said mortgage rates are down, which is true. Mortgage rates when Trump came in were close to 7. Now I think today they're at around 6.2. But that's still way, way above what people want and need to be able to unlock the housing market. And the way that he has brought down rates so far is to destroy the economy, like to produce. We're seeing like record amounts of layoffs. Somebody said more firings this last month than since 2020 to 2003. We don't have the data on it because the government's shut down, but when the new data comes in, it's probably going to be shocking. And that deterioration of the economy has finally sparked the Fed to reduce interest rates, which flows into mortgage rates. So it's like, okay, good job getting mortgage rates down by 60 basis points, but at the cost of like a deteriorating economy.
And speaking of economy, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd like to play the Steve Bannon SOT if we've got that.
We'll do that, and then we'll get to Airlines.
And then because go while you're pulling that up, I can just update people a little bit on the Airlines piece though, because as the shutdown continues on, And Democrats, I think, feel pretty vindicated in their positioning given the electoral romp that they were able to pull off this week. Meanwhile, you have 42 million people who are not receiving food stamp benefits on which they rely. You have a federal judge who first ordered the Trump administration, hey, you do have emergency funds you have to tap. Trump administration, as they frequently do, were like, oh, yeah, we'll try and we're getting around to it and blah, blah, blah. Court came and said, no, you have till this Friday to pay out 100% of the benefits that are owed. Now the Trump administration is appealing that. So people continue to go without these food benefits. And, you're starting to see the stories of I had to go dumpster diving in the Walmart parking lot to be able to feed myself and my family. I have to pick. Do I put the $1.50 I have in my bank account towards half a gallon of gas to go to the food bank or to go to the store? Or, if I have to go to work, like I genuinely don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm already, because it's not like the food stamp benefits are super luxurious to start with. By the end of the month, they're gone and you're waiting for that next tranche to hit. And so, people really feeling the pain there. And now we already have a lot of chaos in the air because there's been every day you see ground stop here, ground stop there, ground stop wherever, because air traffic controllers are not getting paid. I saw somebody share online like the $0 pay stub that they receive for working as an air traffic controller. And now the government is going to enforce a 10% cut on all airline flights to deal with the fact that, you still are shut down and people aren't getting paid. And so people are not showing up to work and they're taking their leave, et cetera. Not to mention, like, these are the kind of jobs where you really want people to be like locked in and not having to worry about, am I going to be able to like pay my health insurance premium and make my rent this month? So, as we head into Thanksgiving here, people with no food stamp benefits and looking at the air travel situation, which is already a nightmare, and wondering if their holiday plans are even remotely possible at this point. And I feel like, we're already at the place where these things are becoming incredibly painful.
Let's hear a little bit from the airlines.
Let's put this all into context. The U.S. handles about 45,000 flights a day. A 10% reduction of that is worse than the worst cancellation day of the past year. Every day until the shutdown ends. So this is not a small tweak. Aviation's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when you slow the system, you slow commerce, air travel, supply chains, deliveries nationwide. The clock is really ticking now. Never in modern U.S. aviation history has the federal government done an across-the-board cut of flight capacity like this. And now it seems that passengers are going to be the one paying for it.
Yeah, I'm going to a conference in Lisbon on Sunday night. And so I don't think they're canceling the transatlantic flights for like economic and geopolitical reasons. But who knows? We'll see. Maybe
we'll
Krystal,
get there for
Krystal, you're supposed to fill
early.
in for me on Wednesday, but maybe I'll actually be there.
Maybe you'll be around.
Yeah.
And it's just the idea that everyone is going to see this and blame Democrats when Republicans are in power. It just, I understand Democrats are the ones withholding their votes. I get that. But I think what Trump has realized, just since the elections, if these leaks are to be believed, is that they're the ones that are in power and people are pointing the fingers at them. So when Sean Duffy is the one who's the head of transportation and has to go out and talk about this, they're like, oh, this is the Trump guy, right? Like that's just the association people make in their minds. This is the Trump administration who's telling us about these shutdowns, and it all goes back to them.
Yeah.
Well, Trump has been saying, energy costs are down, which we have a clip of right here. So
huge. It's true.
This is his pivot to affordability. Let's take a listen.
Talk about the cost of Thanksgiving and the cost of living through Thanksgiving and enjoying Thanksgiving for Joe Biden is 25% more than it is for me. At a later time, our energy costs are way down. Our groceries are way down. Everything is way down. And the press doesn't report it. The press reports whatever the con people say. I call the Democrats con men and women.
All right. So, Krystal, you have been debunked. Actually, everything is cheap and everything's down.
Well, I did see there was a community note, which are getting, I think, rarer at this point. But on this clip of the president, apparently the Walmart basket of goods he's talking about contains like 8 fewer items than it did last year, and they swapped in like the Walmart brand for the brand names or whatever. So we're not comparing apples to apples here. Not that any of you needed me to tell you that, because you all exist and presumably eat food and purchase it at some store somewhere, and so have some awareness of what the prices are doing right now, which is really the problem. Like, I think we're not getting economic data from the government because of the shutdown. Even before that, there was a question of whether we're getting data at all or accurate data. I think there was a sense from the Trump administration that if they just fudged the numbers, that they'd be able to lie to people about what was going on with the economy. That is not going to work because people have their own direct, tangible experience of what's in my bank account. Can I afford the things that I could afford previously? Am I making it to the end of the month? Do I have sufficient money for rent? Can I ever dream of owning a home or paying my health insurance premium? So I don't need like a government statistician to tell me how things are going for me economically in my own life. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was just saying exactly right. Trump's consolidation of the media is like, obviously that's helpful to him, but controlling CBS News is only going to get you so far. Because exactly, like, people live in the world. They go to the grocery store. They see what a bag costs. They know what it used to cost. They see their checking account. They know what they used to have at the end of the month and now what they now have at the end of the month. And nothing Barry Weiss tells them is going to change that. So you can only go so far with the control of the media.
Yeah, that's totally true. So I don't know. I mean, Ryan, do you think, I saw before the election there was some sense of Democrats being like, oh, maybe we'll take a deal. Then I saw there was, Bernie Sanders was trying to rev up all the troops, like they're, you got to stand strong at this point. I saw an Axios article that was like, Democratic members of the House and activists are telling leadership there will be hell to pay from the base if you guys cave at this point. So where do you think, things stand in terms of how Democrats are thinking about this?
I think Republicans are also, and curious for Emily's take on this, very motivated in the Senate to get a deal because Trump is putting enormous pressure on them to get rid of the filibuster. They don't want to get rid of the filibuster. They probably don't even have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. And so in order to get rid of that pressure, they need to get out of this shutdown. They're talking about, Democrats want to vote. They're like, just give us a vote. They're like, we're not demanding the subsidies. Like, just give us a vote on the subsidies. And we expect that if you put it on the floor, it will pass. And then we open the government back up. So that, I feel like Democrats are dug in on that point.
Which means, so Republicans are never going to do that because it forces them to look like they're voting against the subsidies. It was actually I don't know if it was Hakeem Jeffries' idea. It seems like a Schumer idea to me, but that's quite a clever trap. But what that will do is force Republicans to come to the table and give a little bit of something to get out of that public relations nightmare. Now, the substance of it is obviously a nightmare for everybody who's about to see a massive spike and is already seeing the massive spike. But that's how Dems are negotiating, by putting Republicans in a little bit of a PR pickle by making them vote on it. So that means Republicans are going to have to, in all likelihood, give something. And that's what Trump has been absolutely resistant to doing. And if the midterm or the off-year elections kind of broke his resolve on that question, seeing what happened just basically across the board with Dems running up the margins, maybe that's the sign that John Thune and Mike Johnson need to actually go to the table and have serious conversations about what policies there's give and take on.
Yeah. Well, and part of the reason why Republicans are very adamant about not getting rid of the filibuster is, I think it's starting to set in for them that they are not going to always be in power, that some of the wilder things that are being done by the Trump administration, they're starting to imagine, what if President AOC had those powers? What could she? Not that she would, because I don't know, Democrats don't seem to use power in the same way Republicans did, but it's also a different day. You just had, normie liberal voters vote for a guy who threatened to murder his political opponent. So it's a different vibe out there than it used to be. We're no longer doing the, like, you go low, we go high thing. That's out the window. So with the Supreme Court and the tariffs, right? They were floating, okay, well, could a future president declare a climate change emergency? I saw some reporting about Republicans privately being like, if Biden had sent, let's say, Illinois National Guard troops into my state of Arkansas, Oklahoma, or whatever, we would have lost our damn minds. Not so sure about this precedent. And, it's the same thing with the filibuster, where they're like, okay, if we get rid of that, they could add senators from DC. They could add senators from Puerto Rico. They could, they could add seats to the Supreme Court, or at least term limit or age limit the Supreme Court. These things would be much more on the table and would change some of the balance that right now is, in favor, because of Republicans' rural dominance, is kind of electorally favorable towards Republicans. So in that vein, there was a clip from Steve Bannon that I've been itching to get to, where he told an audience, like, hey, listen, if they win the midterms, some of us, including me, are going to jail. Let's go ahead and take a listen to the way that he frames this.
And I will tell you right now, as God is my witness, if we lose the midterms and we lose 2028, some in this room are going to prison, myself included. They're not going to stop. They're getting more and more and more radical. And we have to counter that. And what do we have to counter it with? We have to counter it with more action, more intense action, more urgency. We're burning daylight. If you look across every aspect of this, we have to codify what President Trump has done by executive order, right? We have to codify it.
Some tepid applause there for
if he's worried,
Republicans who don't.
We've got our boy covered. We're not letting the AOC regime put Steve Bannon in jail.
Look,
come on, we got you, man. Don't worry.
I am not aware of any recent Steve Bannon crimes. I mean, he did already go to prison for some things, but we had the whole build the wall fraud and whatever. I'm not aware of any new Steve Bannon crimes. I do have some other people in mind who are committing crimes. I don't think Stephen Miller should feel comfortable with his, ongoing freedom in a few. I think some of these things will be litmus tests in a Democratic primary. I don't think he's wrong about that. But their sense, accurate or not, right? Because again, I don't see Democrats using power in the same way that Republicans do. Their sense, whether that is accurate or not, that this is existential, I'm sure Emily is going to color their approach to politics and the way that they, conduct themselves from here on out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it already is. I
agree.
Yeah, I think Bannon went to prison for defying a subpoena, congressional subpoena. It was almost unprecedented. It may have literally been unprecedented. Maybe it happened one other time, or you would know this, but it was. That after that, it changed the way a lot of people saw these things. I doubt that Stephen Miller is fully comfortable. I'm sure he understands that there could be, significant legal challenges or whatever mounted by Democrats when they're back in power. And a lot of this, Biden declared an emergency to do student loan relief. And honestly, nobody really cared. Like, that wasn't a major issue that the public backlash was crazy over. And partially the reason that a fairly career moderate establishment guy like Joe Biden did that is because Donald Trump violated lots of norms. And again, nobody seems to care. Maybe the one norm that there's been significant backlash to is lawfare against Trump. I think the public had a reaction to that was overwhelmingly negative. But otherwise, something Ryan said, 6 months ago, just like stays with me and haunts me. It's like, you don't want to be the type of country where anybody who runs for office does so with the expectation that they could go to prison, because the incentive structure is just a disaster in that case. And it just creates a total rot that we've always been priding ourselves, that we've always prided ourselves in sort of having a system that's better than that. And the system depends on the people. And that's where things are looking...
I have a question to Ryan on that. That doesn't make sense to me, because then doesn't that just give people that, like, once you get in office, you can commit any crime? Isn't like so many of our problems built around the fact that none of these people go away? Like
there's no elite accountability.
That can be true.
The architects of the Iraq War, like everything, like all these people are still around. So like, what are we supposed to do about that?
Both things are true. If you accept like that, there are some norms that we abide, and like, let's say we don't torture people. And that when Obama comes in, he launches an investigation into torture. And did people break the law when it comes to torture? And if the public broadly across the board accepts that that behavior was outside of the norms of what we allow, then that does not create a precedent that everybody then assumes if they lose office that they're going to go to prison. Because there are a lot of countries where that is just an accepted kind of part of cost of doing business. I'm going to get into politics, and I know at some point I'm going to get thrown out of office and I'm going to go to prison. And then I'll probably get out of prison. Like basically every prime minister in Pakistan has gone to prison at some point and then oftentimes comes back and becomes prime minister again. It happens, the current one, in fact. But if you start prosecuting people for things that are within the norms, that's when, just because they're your opponent, that's when it creates this unwillingness then to cede power.
And you don't get prosecutions for like, well, I don't know, war crimes, like crimes against humanity. You get ham sandwich prosecutions where it's like cooked up stuff.
Like this mortgage fraud nonsense where like it's clearly Tish James has like a second home where her niece lives in it. And the Trump administration gins up this fake prosecution to say like, oh, it's like this is actually a rental property and she claimed it as primary. It's like rental. Who's the renter? There's no renter. It's her niece.
I get it for the fake crimes, but like, so are we saying that Stephen Miller shouldn't like go to jail for his crimes?
So
that's what I'm asking.
So that's why I'm saying that you have to have full public buy-in to go after people for crimes they committed while in office. Like Nixon, let's say he wasn't pardoned. The public was bought in on prosecutions because what he did was assumed to be outside the bounds of what was acceptable.
The public was outraged about the pardon. Yeah.
And people were okay that nobody's above the law. And so if you get the public's buy-in in both parties, then you can do it and you don't create a cycle of everybody just throwing each other in prison. So that's the distinction there. Doesn't mean you can't have accountability. It just means if you throw everyone in prison for being on the other side, then you really undermine the ability of the elections to actually see a real peaceful transfer of power. Because
so you can break the law, but you need a popular mandate. So people can break the law, but you need like a popular mandate to break the law. Okay.
Yeah, like let's say Biden went through, like the Supreme Court's like, no, you can't do the debt cancellation, which they told him. And he's like, no, you're wrong. I can do that. Like, I disagree. And he just does it.
Yeah.
And the public is like, good. Yeah, F the Supreme Court on this. Who's the Supreme Court to come in? They're wrong. And then the public's with you, then you don't lock Biden up for that.
But this is why Bannon is scared, because Bannon went to prison for a fairly norm-breaking prosecution over subpoena defiance, and nobody cared, right? Like the right cared, of course, like hardcore and MAGA absolutely cared, but the media didn't come to his defense. But
it is also, Emily, I mean, let's not downplay what he did either. They wanted him to testify, and he was just like, fuck you. And like that also doesn't allow your system to function. Like if Congress, has the subpoena power and power to investigate, and they're going through, the proper procedure, and you're subpoenaed, and you're just like, no, I'm not going to do it.
And if you're doing that on principle, that's normal.
We can't operate this way, right? And I think there's Ryan, you raised this possibility, like that may be what we're facing if when Democrats take control of the House, for example. You could see, a lot more of that where they, in theory, have some power. But if people just refuse to submit to the subpoenas and the administration refuses to comply, then you're at the mercy of, whatever judicial process to say like, no, actually, they do have this power and you have to comply.
So I just think when it happens in one direction. Oh, sorry, Ryan. I was just saying when it happens in one direction, that's where Bannon is like, people don't care. People like it doesn't matter.
But what's another equivalent?
A Comey,
situation?
Right? Like we were arguing about Comey the other week,
Comey's
and I mean, it's different, slightly different crime, but I mean, it's kind of similar setting.
Comey didn't commit. I mean, I think the Comey prosecution is total and complete bullshit, and that's not to say I'm a Comey fan. But like, give me an equivalent situation. There may be one. I'm not saying that there's not. I'm just not aware of an equivalent situation where you had a Democrat who was subpoenaed to, testify before Congress, and they're just like no, I'm not going to do it.
It has happened before. It's definitely happened before where other people have done it, but going to prison, let's see, I'm grokking it right now.
Okay.
Not really. I think a lot of it came from like Cold War Watergate days. Yeah, it looks like the last one before Bannon was like in the mid 80s.
And it happens to journalists. Like journalists get subpoenaed for their sources, and journalists refuse to give the sources.
Judy
and then they
Miller.
They go to
yeah, she went to prison.
They go to jail
but again,
for that.
this is not like that's that's not the same either, because that's like a principle.
But
Bannon just didn't want to say anything that was inconvenient for Trump.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's not unprecedented to go to prison for refusing a subpoena.
Yeah. So
like that's
in modern history.
Yeah. So your point is, even journalists who have like a good reason to refuse it have still been imprisoned for it.
Right. And that was a really awkward time for people because Judy was, one of the most discredited reporters out there.
Yeah.
But you still had to stand by the principle that protecting your sources, even if they're awful,
even if you'd like to see them all go to prison. Yes.
Yeah. Other examples like Eric Holder, Lois Lerner, those are good examples, but also Karl Rove. That's one of the things Ollie North was pardoned for, and Elliot Abrams was pardoned for. Actually, now that I'm going deep now. That's
there you go.
But anyway, it's a bad situation. So it's bleak. It's bleak. It's bleak.
All right, joining us now is Michael Blake, former mayoral candidate, former vice chair of the DNC, former assemblyman from the Bronx, who has launched this week a primary challenge to Representative Ritchie Torres. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you. How are we doing today?
We're all doing good. You're joining us from Puerto Rico, I understand, which it seems like everyone in the New York echelon is there. Mamdani, I've seen a bunch of other people are in Puerto Rico. What's going on there? Like, why'd everybody decamp?
Kathy Hochul.
Yeah, Kathy Hochul. Hochul. I mean, the elected officials that care about New York are here, which is why Ritchie Torres is not. And so we are here at the Somos Conference. It is one of three major political events that happen for New York throughout the course of the year. And when you think about the Bronx and you think about New York, Puerto Rico is obviously intertwined. And so just yesterday, I was able to go spend some time with Power for Puerto Rico, local nonprofit, doing incredible things. Today, I'm leading a session around democracy in the community. And if you care about New York, you care about Puerto Rico. And if you care about the Bronx, you care about Puerto Rico, which is exactly why I'm running for Congress, because you need to have someone who's actually going to fight for the people in the Bronx. And Ritchie Torres, once again, is absent.
Griffin, can you cue up his Michael's launch video so we can all get a taste of that? Everybody watch closely, because there's a bit of a cameo from some folks that you might know here.
And as I was living in these slum conditions, the city was spending more than $100 million on a golf course.
Ritchie Torres invested in weapon makers.
Was just exposed for secretly investing in genocide.
All these things I'm seeing about Ritchie Torres.
Since 2021, Ritchie Torres has represented New York's 15th congressional district, the poorest congressional district in America. In 2025, Ritchie has nearly $15 million on hand, largely from AIPAC, while many of his constituents barely have $15 to get by. So he spent the last 15 days hearing from the people about why they're ready for a change.
I saw Ritchie Torres on Adam Friedland. I know he suffered, but what happens to you is you get off. It is so hard to keep your moral integrity once you start taking the money.
He profited from it.
He talks about that place far more often than he talks about the Bronx.
You were criticized for Blackstone donation, the architects of the housing crisis.
What a asshole.
You cannot be a representative in the city of New York and you talk like that.
Ritchie Torres sucks.
Not as long as
Ritchie Torres is a white mother. Ritchie Torres cares more about BB than he cares about the Bronx. More about AIPAC than he does about your academics. So do you want to stay with someone who only wants to care about himself? Or do you want to have someone in me and Michael Blake who actually wants to care for the people? I'm reimagining what the city can look like. I'm named after Jamaican prime ministers, Michael Manley, Alexander Bustamante. Grew up Creston and Burnside. Remember the days back in the day when you go to Woolworths to go shop, Steak Heat, go kick it.
Whose track record has spoken for itself for years.
So when we think about why elect me, think about cost of living and affordability.
We can give people a better chance.
Think about a new vision when it comes to education.
I rolled out an extensive education plan.
And lastly, show the vision of how we can bring real change to the district.
So, Michael, I think the ad speaks for itself. The launch video speaks for itself in terms of the case against Ritchie Torres. I also will say I don't know that our audience needs the case made against Ritchie Torres. I think they're all on board with wanting to see a change there. But just give our audience a little bit of a sense of who you are. How'd you end up in this place? Your sort of political journey to this moment.
This is home for me, Krystal. I'm born and raised in the district. I grew up Creston and Burnside. I always tell people, I'm a PS 79. 118 DeWitt Clinton High School kid. My elementary school is the one that Jonathan Kozol wrote about in Savage Inequalities. My high school is the one that has the largest alumni association in the world. So James Baldwin, County Cullen, Charlie Rangel. And we have for decades been the poorest congressional district. We're a place that's constantly disrespected. My family's from Jamaica. I'm actually going to be going down next week to go check on families in Jamaica and figure out how we mobilize in the community. My full name I'm named after the Jamaican Prime Minister. So I always tease my mom that her and daddy are the reasons I am this, that I am the epitome of a Jamaican stereotype of tree job. So I'm a preacher, I'm a public servant, and been a journalist. I'm doing this because we deserve better in the Bronx. I'm doing this because right now we have someone who is not focused on what's actually happening on the ground. We're actually not helping people higher wages. We have longer pantry lines. Krystal, Ryan, everybody. Earlier this week, I was at a 7-day Adventist church where there were more than 400 people standing in line at a weekly food pantry. So you have a scenario where we're not being helped, we're not being represented, and someone in Ritchie Torres who just doesn't give a damn about us. And when we think about the moment that's at stake right here, as we just saw with Zohran's win, who I proudly cross-endorsed. We cross-endorsed each other in the mayoral primary. I said very clearly, if it's not me, it should be him, because we were talking about the most important issue that people cared about, which is cost of living. And people are ready for a new generation of leadership. And they're tired of these folks who don't give a damn about them. And Ritchie Torres is that. That's why I'm running for my people.
For people watching, the book Savage Inequalities is a searing portrait of education, the education crisis of inequality in America. That's amazing that you went to that school. Everybody should check that book out.
I was there at the time he wrote about it, Brian. James
Did
Carter.
You know him? Because didn't he teach at the school for a while?
I actually got to meet Jonathan afterwards. James Carter was my principal. And I said often, Principal Carter was, I think, the only Black man I could remember in an education role until I got to college.
Wow.
Wow. So we want to talk about the Bronx soon, as your launch ad makes clear. Like you're hitting him from both directions, saying that he's too focused on his support for Israel and not focused enough on the Bronx. What has been your own journey, when it comes to support for Israel? My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you took an AIPAC funded, trip, which is the thing that, most politicians are offered an AIPAC trip to Israel to get the propaganda version. When was that? What was that trip like? And what has your journey been like on the question of U.S. relationship with Israel?
Absolutely. Like all things, life is that journey, and it has been that journey to see the truth. Right? So for context, I was an Obama staffer who came back to New York. I got elected to office in 2014. In 2014, I took that trip. I've been to Israel twice. I went to Israel AIPAC once, and I went with JCRC as well, Jewish Community Renewal Council. And what you see very quickly is breathtaking in many ways of, yes, you can acknowledge and recognize the power and beauty that happens in all parts of our world. But I remember being a part of a meeting where an individual said apartheid is happening, and then the meeting was stopped. Right? I recognize and saw the power of when you have someone who was from Ethiopia who talked about the recognition of Israel and that dynamic. I get that, and I saw that. I appreciated that. But Ryan, Krystal, everybody, the journey continued thereafter, because you start to then realize slowly that you are being given a side that's not giving the full picture. 2017, I spoke at an AIPAC conference, and particularly it was around Black and Jewish leaders coming together for that moment. Right? And I said within one of those events, AIPAC had changed my life forever in that moment, because quite frankly, it allowed me to go to Israel, which I had never been before, to see it, which I'm also an ordained reverend, which obviously adds to this dynamic. You know, I was able to baptize people in the River Jordan. I was able to pray at the Western Wall. I was able to lead the Sermon on the Mount. But as soon as we came off stage, Bibi Netanyahu was speaking virtually. And when the reference of President Obama was made, the room started to boo. And that's when you start to realize that you are being pushed a message from AIPAC that is not fully true and direct and sincere about what is happening. Now, people will say to me, well, why did you continue to go to some of the meetings? Because, you know, at the end of the day, with any journey, you want to learn what's happening, but then you get to a point where you say enough is enough. And what has happened? What has happened is that you have an organization in AIPAC where just early this year was reported that 46% of their donors in Democratic primaries had also given to Republican races for the purpose of having a Republican-like Democrat in these races. What has happened is that you have a genocide that is occurring. And as a human being, to ignore that, and it's not just Michael Blake saying that, that's the United Nations and so many others that are stating that. You cannot ignore that. Let us also be very clear that to tell a Black man who has endured racism and poverty and challenges, who also preaches, that me being critical of a government does not make me anti-Israel. In the same way I've said to folks, if you could criticize Donald Trump, that does not make you anti-American. And we have allowed right now this game where people are trying to push me into a box and push others into the box from what's actually true. So where we're at right here today is that that journey is a continual one. And unless you were with me, where I prayed and cried with people because it was Jews, Christians, and Muslims able to pray together, who at the same time have now elected a 34-year-old Muslim South Asian man as mayor, who at the same time can acknowledge the magnitude of it. And then lastly, on a final personal note, in terms of that journey, World Central Kitchen and Jose Andres, many people have seen, is a dear friend. Jose has been a blessing to me. He brought World Central Kitchen to the Bronx during COVID, which I will also say that in 2020, when we were focusing on feeding families, Ritchie Torres focused on raising money. One of the people in World Central Kitchen, Zuri, was one of the individuals that was killed by the attack that came from the Israeli government, where they said, well, it wasn't our intention, and that was not the case. And so when I ask people is to look at the breadth of it all, the journey has been very real for me. It's one where you understand that information is being given to you that's not fully comprehensive. But where we're at today is you can say at the same time that, yes, what Hamas did is inhumane. And at the same time, that Palestinians losing their lives because of a genocide is inhumane. You can say at the same time that we must end anti-Semitism, while at the same time we got to end Islamophobia. And others who are unwilling to say that should not be in office.
One question I have from the ad, based on everything you just outlined, it seems to me a calculated strategy. When you mention Ritchie Torres and AIPAC, you tie that right back to what you discussed as your sort of central motive for running for office, which is affordability and cost of living. And I was just curious if that was intentional, if that is part of how you see making this argument, because it's easy, especially when you're in the online discourse, to get down the rabbit hole of elite obsessions and having some of these fascinating conversations about history and all of that. But for a lot of average people, they're just trying to put food on the table. So was that a concerted strategy to tie these all together? And how do you see the connection between Torres being the kind of guy who takes money from AIPAC and is also maybe behind on economic populism?
That he's not focusing on the number one issue, which is cost of living. He's not focusing on how people need help. Look, I'm that kid that understands when we had to sell dinners on Saturday afternoons to pay rent. That first year in the assembly when I slept on the couch because I couldn't afford the dynamic of going back in Albany. Like the reality is people are struggling. Even if they have multiple jobs, they are struggling. They're wondering how they're going to pay their bills. And I wanted to be very clear that his focus on AIPAC and supporting AIPAC as it is and continues to be is not having a focus on what the people need right now, which is better housing. For example, Ritchie said himself that NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, public housing is federal oversight. There was an explosion that happened at the Mitchell houses just recently. Ritchie also was the chair of housing in the city council. So when we think about the dynamic, it's been a continual failure of not fixing the problem when it comes to housing. When I talked, as I said in the ad, what would I do? End credit scores being used for housing applications and have a local median income because area median income is not working for us on the ground. So to your question, I'm able to say, let me focus on helping people when Ritchie has not been focused on helping the people. When we talk about what's going on as it relates to Puerto Rico, the need for self-determination, he has not been focused on this. When we talk about what's going on in the Caribbean and Jamaica, immediately I said, how do we help our Jamaican, our Dominican, our Haitian communities all at the same time? When we talk about what's going on in education, where schools are wondering right now, how is it that we're going to be able to help these kids go to school and graduate from school? I want to be very clear that all of those things have gotten worse under Ritchie Torres. And Ritchie Torres has made a decision that his focus is not the people of the Bronx. It has been to AIPAC.
Michael, tell people a little bit about what would your specific policy priorities be? Are you a Medicare for all guy? Are you, what are some of the things that you're really wanting to prioritize if you were elected to Congress?
First and foremost, everything's going to be around cost of living and the economic issue. So I've talked about this a lot. Credit scores for housing have to end. It is a institutionally racist discriminatory policy that you're telling someone who pays their rent on time, that pays their bills on time, that the reason why they are unable to get access to a new home is because of a credit score, because someone might have missed a bill by a day, but they paid their rent. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's purely to block people out the game. When we think about local median income, area median income does not work. When you have Westchester County and other counties being a part of what's calculated for AMI in New York, it's making it more expensive for us to have a home in New York. These are federal policies that have local dynamics that I talked about in the previous race because they're all intertwined because it impacts us here in the city. When it comes to healthcare, we do need the Medicare for all. We do need to be very focused on how we're helping more people to have coverage because what are we watching right now? We're watching every single day people genuinely wondering, will I be covered for my healthcare? I'm wondering, do I have money for prescription drugs? I'm wondering what happens for these bills. And so we have to be serious about this. As you all know, and when I worked President Obama and the Affordable Care Act, there are things we could have gone further and we should have gone further. And this is the moment to do so right now. Right? And I also think, Krystal, to the question of, where do we stand in this moment? Because you're going to have individuals that are going to try to paint me and paint anyone that is critical, understandably, of being anti of communities. What people are looking for is how do you communicate a vision where everybody can win and thrive? And I can't represent an area like the South Bronx in the 15th District without understanding that everybody has to have a voice. Multiple times throughout the mayoral election, including the Thursday before the election, Ritchie Torres refused to endorse Zohran Mamdani, specifically because he said of one community within the district. He stood by a man who had sexually assaulted women, stood by a man where thousands of people died during COVID, stood by a man who had done all those things. And so while there's also policy priorities that I've just laid out, Krystal, there's also just the humanity that you got to have someone who's actually going to care for you. and care for everybody and actually create a space that we can have some real conversation and not have someone, Ritchie Torres, who literally said when someone came up to him that he disagreed with, to go fuck yourself. That's not what you need as a representative. I know that surprised people that a reverend would cuss, but I am Jamaican from the Bronx, so you just got to be ready for that kind of thing.
Michael, can you talk a little bit about, my understanding is Ritchie's approval rating in the district is pretty favorable. And, you know, can you talk about the difference between perhaps how he's perceived in the Bronx versus his image nationally?
Certainly. Well, I also would say favorability and job performance are not all intertwined in terms of how someone can get elected or reelected, right? You had many people that had high favorability ratings who lost races itself, whether that be Eric Cantor, whether that be Congressman Crowley at AOC. I mean, we have seen that. And when you have that communication to let people know about what has not been happening, they shift pretty quickly. Within the district, right? When you see the energy that has happened for us on the video, where more than 2 million views have happened on it thus far, that's not just nationally, of course, that's all across the board. It's people feeling that he is not being a voice for them, that he's not helping and not representing them in a serious and continual way. Somebody can show up to your church. They could show up to your community center. They could show up to your local school, but it doesn't mean they're actually fixing the problem. And what we will communicate is that you might like Ritchie Torres because he might smile in your face and try to be kind to you, but he's actually not helping you and your life has not changed for the better. And when you make that clear comparison, people understand that. Now, nationally, because people have been clearly watching what has been going on consistently, I think we can see how people feel about Ritchie. They feel that this is a man who, by his own data, I think the last was like 2,300% talked more about what was happening in another country than in his own community. People pay attention to that. And again, I want to keep being real clear to everybody listening, because what you're going to have happen and watching, because what you're going to have happen is like, well, are we trying to pull people apart? No, I'm just trying to keep it real. Trying to be real with you. That at the end of the day, just because someone shows up when it's convenient doesn't mean that they're helping you. And Krystal, I'm going to make it real practical. Poorest congressional district in the country. People wondering if they're going to have food. People wondering how they're going to get groceries. People wondering how they're going to pay their bills. The man got $15 million. Why is he not using that money to help you? Why is he not putting it towards community efforts immediately and consistently at a higher and continual degree? Now he'll say, yes, I helped you and I got some federal funding here and there. But how you use this moment of leverage is real. And so people see him for who he is, which is why we have the energy that's happening right now. It's why we're going to start rolling out endorsements next week. It's why we're going to be showing momentum consistently. It's the reason why we have had people of all different spectrums from across the district already saying we're ready.
There was, Ryan, go for it, and then I got a question.
Just real quick. Yeah, there was some real hope when he was elected in 2020 that as somebody who he grew up in public housing in the district, obviously like a very, very bright, like, you know, hyper intelligent guy, especially compared to, you know, the rest of Congress, which I, as somebody who's covered it for 20 years, I can tell you it struggles down there. That
he would be a haymaker you just gave Ryan to the rest of them, but I appreciate that right there.
that he'd be a voice for the poor, like that's somebody who came up in the poorest district and is now representing it and was able to articulate a vision of fighting back against that finally there'd be, because so many of the poorest districts are represented by people who take corporate PAC money, represented by Republicans in the Freedom Caucus, and they don't stand up for their district. They stand up for the people that fund their campaigns. And that hope from Torres was dashed, that, you know, because he, as you said, all he's talked about, you know, as far as the public understands, is Israel. And whether you agree with them or disagree with them on it, like what does that have to do with the Bronx? So if you were able to get in, like, how would you be that voice for the Bronx? Like, what are the What are the issues that you would try to force into the national conversation that aren't there because these poorest districts in the country just generally, not there's some exceptions, don't have representatives who speak on their behalf?
Well, to that question, Ryan, let's start from even the visual behind you about the squad, right? Like Ritchie is not only just demeaned what's been happening elsewhere, he's demeaned his own Democratic members who are not aligned with him, right? Consistently, repeatedly, the disrespect he's had towards AOC, to Ilhan, to Rashida and others. And as relates to even locally with the DSA, which he called a Mickey Mouse club and a Mickey Mouse party, this is the rhetoric of Ritchie Torres that he regularly does. Going back to the 2020 race, and I do think this is important because it's good context. I pretty much for about 4 to 5 weeks spent my time feeding people, getting out PPE, getting out masks, and helping people in the community. Ritchie was running a divisive campaign, effectively saying that we should not let one other person in the race because of their stances. And in particular, that was around saying that the homophobe is what his language was around Ruben Diaz Sr., right? That was Ritchie's argument on why he should get to Congress fundamentally, right? And what has happened throughout? You have someone who stated that Governor Hochul is feckless and can deny her own abilities. But then he turned when he saw that Zohran had won the primary. This is a man who had cross-endorsed Tish and then Zephyr Teachout, quite frankly, for his own political protection, right? This is a man that turned on city council when it comes to the right to know act around criminal justice. This is a man who has attacked women when it comes to those that have been a part of the Women's March. I'm saying that to say, for context, that Ritchie has been this before he even got to Congress. And now people are seeing the consistency that he will throw you under the bus in a second for his own gain. And so for now, let's elevate what I have done in New York with the My Brother's Keeper program, where we're still the only state in the country to have a funded program where Black boys and brown boys, young men of color can go to school and graduate from school. And it has now been expanded to a My Sister's Keeper program so that more of our students of color can go to school and graduate at a higher rate. Let's expand out a true effort around local median income, because clearly the poorest congressional districts, not just us, will be substantially able to benefit if the housing that you are getting is more affordable, right? Taking those kinds of steps will impact us in a very real way. And when we talk about hope, right? Like, I clearly was in the, Yes We Can, the Hope Fund. That's the order we came out of with President Obama and that through line. We need to be able to believe in our people right now, right? None of us are perfect. There is no perfect candidate, right? You're going to have people you disagree with. But I do believe that I can restore a vision of what's possible within the district. A district, by the way, that voted for Zohran in the general election this past week. A district that is 41% Black, 37% Latino. A district where my previous assembly district is 100% within the district. So people know our track record. And now it's about telling the story of how we're going to help and fight for you. And say that if you are ready to move on from Ritchie Torres, my name is Michael Blake, and I'm asking that you rock with me so we can go to Congress and fight for you.
I got another question, Michael, for you. Something else that's affecting your community, which is ICE. The day after the election, Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani said that he would warn ICE officers against breaking the law in his city. But then recently from the NY Daily News, there was this scoop that the NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch got a heads up from the Trump admin that ICE agents were about to conduct their aggressive Canal Street immigration raid. Do you think that Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani should fire the NYPD commissioner to someone that's going to better follow his policies of fighting ICE? And what would you do to support your community to defend them from ICE?
So I'll separate, appreciate the question. So that's obviously for the mayor-elect to decide on if he keeps her or not, because it's not really a fire. It's like he's going to be the man in charge on January 1 there. I think it's very concerning that a heads up was given that ICE was going to raid on Canal Street. And there was not real protections that happened for folks. For anybody that doesn't understand New York City, Canal Street is effectively immigrant entrepreneurs, right? That's who's there. And as, my son of immigrant myself, my family's from Jamaica. if you got a heads up that people are going to roll on Canal Street, you understand that a lot of people are going to get arrested and their lives are going to be destroyed. And now we'll have that PTSD sitting with them of at any moment will ICE come back here, right? So it's a problem. It's a deep problem that cannot be ignored in any possible way. What would I do? First, we got to be very clear that we designate our facilities, in particular our schools, our community centers, our places of worship, as safe havens automatically, so that it is very clear that ICE is not permitted into those spaces. That is something that is not currently happening, which is kind of wild to think about that, right? It's a reason why so many of us who are preachers have to be thinking regularly about virtual sermons, because as we saw recently from National Latino Evangelicals, that they've had less people attending their services because they're afraid that ICE will show up there, right? Second is that we have to make sure that it is in multi-languages, access to lawyers that can represent you immediately, as well as the communication that is available, especially when you are dropping off your kids each another way. There was video that just came out just this morning of ICE detaining someone in a car while the man was holding on to his baby, having a seizure. And what was more important to them was to try to rip him away than his child being protected. Third and finally, for now, as it comes to this, we got to make sure that we're not empowering and putting more money into NYPD surveillance efforts that would be helping ICE to attack our communities. And one of the many questions that has been lingering around Ritchie is his support around drones has been very nebulous at best. And if you are helping ICE to make it easier to grab our immigrants, then you should not be representing our immigrants in the South Bronx. And as a son of immigrant myself, I actually going to say very clearly, I know how the federal government should be working for us, and it is not right now because of Ritchie Torres.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah. And if you can tell people where they can follow your campaign, how they can support you if they're interested.
Well, I hope everybody's interested after hearing us right now. Come on, not if right now. Come on, y'all. So go to Michael Blake for Congress, Michael Blake, FORcongress.com. Follow us on social. You'll see the handle MR Mike Blake. You'll see the handle Blake for the Bronx. And we need you right now. Look, this is going to be a grassroots campaign. We need you to donate. We need you to knock on doors because a lot of people are going to be coming for us that don't want us to win. But the people have shown right now, the people are ready to win. So if you're ready and say we deserve better for the Bronx, my name is Michael Blake and I want to be your member of Congress, and rock with us at michaelblakeforcongress.com.
One last question before you go, because I think people will want to know how sharp a contrast we're talking about. Would you support a full weapons embargo on Israel?
There should be. I mean,
there we go.
Like, how can you? I know we got to go. I just like how can you watch what's happening and be the same right now? Right? And again, I think what is happening in this space is that there will be people who hear what I just said and say, well, you're anti-Israel. Absolutely not. It's not about being it's about, I care for humanity, right? Yes, you deserve to have safety. Yes, you deserve the security. But if you're watching babies and families, every dollar we are spending on that, we are not spending on books in the Bronx. We are not spending on making sure people have food and get all the pantry lines. We're not spending on making sure you can actually pay your prescription drug bills. It's a question around priorities, and mine is the Bronx.
All right. Thank you, Michael. And we hope Breaking Points makes more cameos in your ads in the future. We're excited to see where our next clip appears. So thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
All right, we are going to switch it over to the premium half now, folks. So if you want to sign up for membership, breakingpoints.com. It helps us do our journalism. It helps support us when we're under all sorts of attacks like Ryan's BBC attack and more.
Well, we're about to get to drop site reporting in the premium half.
Oh,
so that's
more Jeffrey Epstein.
Dropstein
news.
Jeffrey
Dropstein.
I like it.
Yes, the Dropstein news is coming.
Yeah. It is.
Dropping Israel news, by the way. So it's got all the things.
We'll see you on the other side of that. If you want to sign up for a membership, you can go to the description here or in the pinned comment of this video, breakingpoints.com. You can sign up for a monthly or a yearly membership, get access to our full uncut ad-free shows and the ability to ask us questions, which we'll be answering in the second half. We'll see you all there.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.